Most people think Belgium's economy is stable. They're wrong. On paper, the numbers look healthy. GDP growth appears solid and unemployment stays low. A thriving trade network sits at the heart of Europe. But beneath the surface, there's a hidden problem few ever discuss, something that quietly threatens the very foundations of its financial system. It's not dramatic or obvious. It's there, growing slowly, like a crack in a building that nobody notices until the walls start to shake. At first glance, it seems simple. Belgium has debt like many countries. Every government borrows money and makes promises to pay it back. But here's what most people miss: the structure of that debt, the hidden obligations buried in decades-old promises, and the political gridlock that makes solving problems almost impossible. These three factors combine to make Belgium's situation far more fragile than anyone admits publicly. The country's leaders talk about stability and growth, but they know the system is under silent stress. The story of Belgium's economy isn't just about money owed. It's about promises made decades ago that are now impossible to fulfill. Pensions that were promised to workers who are now retiring. Public spending that's locked into budgets by law and tradition. Regional imbalances that pit different parts of the country against each other in a constant fight over money and resources. These three forces work together to create something like a ticking economic time bomb, buried beneath the surface, counting down. Belgium is a small country geographically, but politically, it's a complicated maze. Flanders in the north, Wallonia in the south, Brussels as a separate region, they each have distinct identities, distinct languages, distinct cultures, and distinct budgets. They each have their own priorities about how money should be spent and how resources should be allocated. This division makes national economic planning almost impossible. When a government can't act decisively because its different parts are constantly arguing with each other, the entire system starts to creak under the weight of indecision. Decisions that should take months take years to implement. Reforms that should be bold and transformative are watered down through endless compromise until they're almost unrecognizable. And problems that could be fixed early are allowed to grow and fester until they become full-blown crises. The regions have different economic strengths, different populations, and different voting patterns. This means any government in Brussels must navigate incredibly complex political calculations just to stay in power. They can't focus entirely on solving economic problems because they are focused on managing regional rivalries and political balance. But why does this matter to the world beyond Belgium's borders? Why should anyone outside Belgium care about its internal problems? The answer is that Belgium sits at the physical and financial crossroads of Europe, connecting the continent's different regions and economies. Its ports handle enormous volumes of goods moving across the continent, making it a critical choke point in European trade. Its banks are deeply connected to global financial markets and hold significant exposure to other European countries. The financial institutions based in Brussels have relationships and contracts with banks across the entire world. If Belgium's banking system falters, if confidence in Belgian financial institutions erodes, the ripples spread immediately and far beyond Belgium's borders. Other European countries depend on Belgian stability and on the functioning of Belgian financial institutions. The entire European financial system has Belgium built into its foundation in ways that most ordinary people didn't realize. And yet, most analyses and most mainstream commentary completely miss the hidden structural weakness that has been growing quietly for decades beneath the surface, hidden from public view. To understand Belgium's hidden problem, we need to look back at history and understand how the country got here. After World War II ended, Belgium rebuilt rapidly. The country was devastated by war, but there was energy and determination to create something better. Industry boomed. Coal and steel powered the growing economy. The government invested heavily in infrastructure, in building roads and ports and factories. It invested in social welfare programs that would take care of workers and their families. It invested in education, believing that educated workers would drive prosperity. Everything seemed solid. The future looked bright. Politicians made promises about prosperity for all. Citizens believed those promises, but beneath the economic boom, cracks were forming that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Belgium had embraced generous social programs, more generous than many other countries. These programs were funded by borrowing, by public debt. At the time, it seemed manageable. Interest rates were low, so borrowing was cheap. Global growth was strong, so tax revenues kept rising. The debt seemed like something that could be managed. But the underlying problem was that the government was making long-term promises with money it didn't have, betting that growth would continue forever and interest rates would stay low forever. Then came the 1980s, and Belgium's situation changed dramatically. The country's debt exploded. By 1982, the debt-to-GDP ratio exceeded 100%. This means the country owed more money than it produced in an entire year. That's when ordinary citizens began to feel the strain in their daily lives. Taxes rose to pay for the debt. Growth slowed. Inflation surged. Purchasing power declined. People noticed that their salaries weren't going as far as they used to. The government responded with austerity measures and attempted reforms. They cut spending in some areas. They tried to reduce the growth of obligations. But the core problem remained unsolved. Obligations were growing faster than revenues. The government was spending more than it was making in a year, and the debt kept climbing. Fast forward to the 1990s. Europe was unifying in ways that had never been tried before. Countries were coming together to create a common market and eventually a common currency. Belgium joined the Eurozone, which meant giving up monetary sovereignty, something that sounds abstract, but had enormous practical consequences. Instead of having its own currency that the government could control and adjust, Belgium became tied to the euro, controlled by the European Central Bank located in Frankfurt, Germany. On the surface, this seemed like a good thing. It promised stability, integration, and a strong currency backed by Europe's economic power. Many politicians celebrated it as a historic achievement that would bring peace and prosperity to the continent. But it had a hidden cost that most people didn't fully understand at the time. It meant Belgium could no longer print its own currency to cover shortfalls when times got difficult. If the country ran out of money during a crisis, it couldn't just create more euros. It had to ask the European Central Bank, and the answer was often no. Suddenly, Belgium had less financial flexibility than ever before in its modern history. Public debt remained stubbornly high, and structural imbalances in the economy deepened. The country was locked into the Eurozone system, for better or worse, unable to escape through currency devaluation or monetary expansion. There was no exit door. Here is the pattern that most mainstream economists ignore when they analyze Belgium. Every single time Belgium experiences an economic crisis, the root cause is exactly the same. It's an inability to align the political structure of the country with financial reality. Regional governments fight over budgets because they feel their region isn't getting a fair share. The national government can't make bold decisions because it needs consensus and agreement from regions that fundamentally disagree with each other about priorities and spending. Meanwhile, debt rises year after year. Social obligations grow because of aging populations and healthcare costs, and nothing gets fundamentally fixed at the root level. The system limps along, making small adjustments instead of major reforms. It's a story of repeated cycles. Boom periods when growth masks problems, then debt accumulation as obligations grow, then crisis when something breaks, then partial reforms that don't really solve the underlying issues, then boom again. Each time the country emerges from a crisis, it looks stronger on the surface, but the hidden fragility grows deeper and more dangerous. It is like a building that looks intact from the outside, but has hidden cracks spreading through its foundation, getting worse every year as stress accumulates. And here is the most revealing part of Belgium's situation. The crisis isn't always about money itself. It's about confidence. Investors need to believe the system will work. Citizens need to have faith in their government. Once that confidence wavers, even a small problem can cascade into a full-blown crisis. A slight worry about debt can become a panic. Investors start demanding higher interest rates to compensate for risk. The cost of borrowing rises sharply. This makes the debt situation worse, which makes people more worried, which pushes rates up even more. Belgium's complex political system amplifies these shocks and makes it harder to respond effectively. By the time politicians agree on a solution, the crisis has already spread. Today, Belgium faces new challenges that are different from past crises, but equally serious. An aging population means pension obligations are skyrocketing. People are living longer, so they're collecting pensions for more years than ever before. Healthcare costs rise faster than economic growth. Every year, more money has to go to healthcare, leaving less for everything else. Regional tensions create a constant budgetary tug-of-war. Flanders, which is wealthier and has more people, often pays more into the national budget. Wallonia, which is poorer, receives more support. Brussels is expensive to maintain as a capital city. Each region feels it's not getting a fair deal. Brussels, the political heart of Belgium and also the capital of the European Union, often has to mediate between the regions. But compromises come slowly and are always incomplete. Nothing ever gets fully resolved because any solution means someone loses. Globally, the situation is getting more difficult. Interest rates have been rising around the world. Debt that seemed manageable when interest rates were 0% or near zero is now far more expensive to service. Belgium's government has to spend billions just paying interest on old debt, money that can't be spent on schools, hospitals, or infrastructure. Belgium is no longer just a local story about internal regional politics. Its banks are heavily integrated into European financial markets. A crisis in Belgium could expose the continent to serious risk. Small mistakes, miscalculations, or unexpected shocks could trigger larger market disruptions that spread beyond Belgium to affect the entire European economy. And yet, mainstream media and mainstream economists focus on the surface numbers. They talk about growth statistics and unemployment rates. They publish quarterly reports on GDP. They analyze trade balances and industrial output. They rarely discuss the structural fragility beneath these indicators. They rarely talk about the political gridlock or the aging population or the rising debt service costs. But those who look closer, who dig beneath the headlines and the official statistics, see a system under silent stress. It's held together by political compromise and borrowed time. It is held together by the hope that growth will continue and that interest rates won't rise too much more. But hope is not a strategy. The deeper lesson here isn't just about Belgium. It's about how economic systems survive or fail to survive. This is a universal lesson that applies to many countries, many organizations, many systems. Public debt isn't inherently dangerous. Governments can borrow responsibly. Growth can mask underlying imbalances for a long time. But when obligations outpace capacity, when the amount owed grows faster than the ability to pay, and when political systems can't adapt quickly enough to address the problem, fragility becomes inevitable. It's a mathematical reality. Belgium teaches us an important lesson about what financial strength really means. Financial strength isn't just numbers on a balance sheet. It's not just GDP or GDP growth or trade volumes. Real financial strength is flexibility. It's the ability to adapt when circumstances change. It's trust in institutions. It's the ability to act decisively when action is needed. Without these qualities, even a small nation at the heart of Europe can face disproportionate risk. A country without flexibility, without trust, without decisive leadership, becomes vulnerable. And here's a philosophical twist that's important to understand. Money is ultimately a promise that's backed by faith in institutions. It's a promise that the government will honor its obligations. It's a promise that the money you hold today will still have value tomorrow. When that faith erodes, the promise becomes fragile. When people stop believing the system will work, the system stops working. Belgium hasn't collapsed yet. The country still functions. Banks still operate. Shops still open. But the hidden problem is there, growing slowly, reminding us that stability is often an illusion, carefully maintained until it isn't. We tend to look at economies like machines, expecting logic to prevail, expecting numbers to follow predictable patterns. But economies aren't machines. Economies are human systems, built on trust and negotiation and compromise and psychology. Belgium's hidden problem is a mirror for every modern economy around the world. Complexity can hide fragility, and the most dangerous risks are often invisible. They're the ones nobody talks about because they're too complicated or too scary to confront directly. In the end, what matters isn't just growth or GDP. Those things matter, but they're not everything. What matters is resilience. It's the capacity to weather shocks when they inevitably arrive. It's the capacity to absorb a crisis and keep functioning. It's the wisdom to see the cracks before they become chasms. It's the political will to make hard decisions before they become impossible decisions. Belgium has time to address its hidden problem, but time is running out. The question is whether the political system can adapt quickly enough to prevent a future crisis. If this gave you a new perspective on how money and systems actually work, and how nations maintain stability, then you've understood something important about how the world really functions. The story of economic fragility and hidden problems is always unfolding, in Belgium and around the world. It's happening if you know where to look.